Welcome to this episode of Sunny's Silver Linings. Sunny's guest today is Lloyd Fickett. Lloyd is the founder of the Collaborative Way, an intentional way of working that reduces reactivity, increases collaboration, and harnesses the collective intelligence, imagination, and spirit of an organization's workforce. Listen as Lloyd talks about the 5 principles of the Collaborative Way, advice for team members, and harnessing great working relationships with employees and leaders. And now, your host, the founder and CEO of IT by Design, Mr. Sunny Kaila. Over to you, Sunny.
Lloyd, thank you so much for coming to my podcast as my special guest. And I'm just so excited about having this conversation, collaborative way conversation today. So welcome to my podcast.
Thank you. It's a delight to be in this conversation with you today.
Thank you. And let's start with learning a little bit about you and Collaborative Way. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Collaborative Way origin story?
Sure, be delighted to. A little bit about myself. Well, let's see. I live in Boulder, Colorado now, and I've got 4 grandkids, 3 of which will be in college when school year starts. And I have 2 sons. I was married to just a delightful woman, Lynn, an extraordinary, inspiring woman who died just a little less than 2 years ago of ovarian cancer. So I miss her every day. And we had an extraordinary love affair and partnership, and I get to live in what we created together. So it's extraordinary. And we practiced the collaborative way in our relationship, and was part of what made it the partnership and that it was, and was unbelievably helpful when we met those challenging times that we met at the end of her life together. So that's a little bit about me. The Collaborative Way started back in 1990, and it came into being in the face of living in a challenge. And the challenge was to generate an extraordinary way of working together. I was working with a company that was the world's leader in providing consumables for polishing silicon wafers, making computer chips. And back in 1989, there was this breakthrough in making chips that was called planarization, where they found a way to put planes of printed circuits on one computer chip. And the owners of Rodale realized their market was going to explode. And when it did, they were going to have very large competitors like 3M and Cabot move into their marketplace. And their question was, how can we compete against them when they can throw more PhDs, more money at this market than we possibly can? And their conclusion was that the only way we'll continue to be world leaders is if we can come up with an extraordinary way of working together. And based on some work I'd done helping them merge back 2 of their companies together, they asked me to join them in that effort. And so as I was engaged in that effort is how the Collaborative Way was born. We had this breakthrough because we'd started off doing it traditionally, like we were working to build leadership skills and build communication skills, shift behavior, build commitment. And while we're making progress developing individuals, what I saw was we weren't making enough progress fast enough. And in that question, what can we do here? How are we going to break through? I suddenly saw something so simple And the simple thing was, if you want an extraordinary way of working together, then it's important to call out a small set of practices that will define and shape how you work together, and then take on learning that way of working. And then when I looked at what those might be, it just was very clear from all my past experiences in being on extraordinary teams. The 5 practices of the collaborative way emerged: listening generously, speaking straight, being for each other, honoring commitments, acknowledgement and appreciation. These 5 commitments taken together in practice focused on accomplishing whatever it is we were up to together.
That's awesome. That's awesome story. So when it started in 1990, Lloyd, and when you look at 2021, teamwork, what I see in the market, teamwork is a lot more important today. It's all, it was always important, but the world that we live in, the speed that we are moving at right now, especially in the technology space, teamwork is a lot more important as a strategic advantage for your company. And when you gave that example that they are competing against a bigger company where they have more resources, so especially for a small, medium-sized business, when you have limited resources, the only strategic advantage that you have is your people. And if your people can work effectively, that teamwork can happen effectively, collaborative way, that is a fantastic thing to have as an organization. So let's move into a little bit more. I want to ask you about your leadership signature. How do you lead your organization and your team?
Well, essentially, the answer to that is I practice the collaborative way. So I found one of the great things about the collaborative way is that when you establish this way of working together, work itself becomes a leadership development program. It requires of the individual to grow to be able to actually practice these commitments. And all these commitments, all these practices arise out of an ethic of responsibility, about taking greater and greater responsibility. And that's so much what it means to be a leader, is to take responsibility and engage.
Yeah.
And while continuing to take responsibility. And that's what the collaborative way is all about. It gives you a pathway for doing that. And I've watched so many other people grow into extraordinary leaders through real deliberate practice of the collaborative way. And that's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
To practice,
Yeah. So you are practicing what you're preaching in your life, right? And that's a beautiful thing. So you mentioned 5 principles to kind of really understand and practice those principles. So number 1 is listening generously. Number 2 is speaking straight. And then acknowledging, appreciating people is number 3. 4th is honoring your commitments. And there's number 5th, which is
being for each other.
Being for each other, yes. Now, let me ask you this. What is the most important practice of the collaborative way?
First off, that is a hard question to answer. But at the same time, I would say that it is being for each other. Mm-hmm. It's really at a certain point, as we were practicing, president of a company that today has been practicing the collaborative way for over 25 years, said to me, Lloyd, being for is the heart of the collaborative way. And it kind of stunned me when he said that. And I began to look and I realized, he's right. It is the heart of the collaborative way. Now, the thing about it is, though, to practice being for each other, you first got to learn how to listen generously to each other. The journey starts there. If we can't listen to each other, we can't get into the practice at all. Yeah. And to truly learn to be able to listen so that you put aside your what we call filters, or your opinions, your prejudice, your historic way of looking at someone, these conclusions you have already set that aren't so obvious initially. And you start to set those aside a little bit and bring some real curiosity, backed up by a willingness to be influenced, and work to get over into the other person's perspective and begin to view the world with some appreciation for their perspective. That's essential to be able to get to a place where you can truly be for another person. And then then you also got to speak straight, because learning to speak honestly in a way that actually contributes to what you're up to together. And that's a challenging thing. One, you got to be straight with yourself. Two, you've got to deal with your own uncomfortableness at times. Three, it requires paying attention to the impact you're making over there, so that you're caring for that in a way that allows what you're really wanting to say to be heard. And it requires that you not let yourself be deflected by defensiveness, for example. You have to learn how to take care of that defensiveness, so that you actually, again, forward what you're up to get to together. So then you come to being for each other, okay? And a natural expression of being for each other is going to be to listen generously, to speak straight, and to honor your commitments and acknowledge and appreciate. So, and boy, being for, when you really understand that it's about one, viewing that person as a human being with family, relationships, connected, not a separate item, and not just merely a means to an end, but a real human being over there. And at the same time, that you're relating in a way that you are for their success. So you're going to call for their greatness. You're going to be really straight with them about things. You're not going to just settle. And if that person has a negative impact on you, you're going to clean that up, so you're not dealing with letting those issues get in the way of being able to deal with the current issues. So it's actually a very challenging way of working together. We were talking the other day, and you were talking about your team practicing, and you referenced it as tough love, and that's a lot of what being for is. It's that it's not that where everybody's just trying to be polite and really nice to each other, so that we're all happy and nobody's rocking the boat. That's not how you accomplish what you're up to. Mm-hmm. So it's a willingness to rock the boat while also not being responsible for how you're behaving, so that if you get reactive or you act out, you clean it up and take care of that. And you're going to have the conversations necessary to move the ball down the field to accomplish what you're up to together.
Yeah. And Lloyd, it took us a while, especially me, to understand what it means to be there, to be there for everyone, for each other. So in my leadership team, as you mentioned, we have recently gone through Collaborative Way training a couple of months ago, and the impact on cross-functional collaboration. It is a very high impact, and we have already seen a lot of positive results as a result of going through that training. And it took us a while to understand what it means to be there for each other. And yes, because in the beginning it was just being nice and everything, but then you mentioned up to. And for people where they don't know what that up to means in the collaborative way, it means what is your team, what is the greater good, the objective, company goals, objectives, strategy, what you are trying to achieve, crucial result that you're trying to achieve as an organization, as a team, that is up to and keeping up to at the center, and then using these principles to accomplish that common goal, that one team, one goal. And when we started learning this system, it was more, first thing that I probably kind of overall, again, listening generously and going deep into that listening was, it means even giving that tough love sometimes. And what that means is that, speaking straight with love and respect, but you are not kind of really beating around the bush. And you are being very open, honest, transparent with love and respect. You are kind of really communicating effectively how you feel and why you feel that way. And if anything, right? So it could be a team member who is not really contributing effectively to that up to, and they're struggling, or they are not honoring their commitment, for example. That's another principle, right? But to me, that up to, that common goal happens when you listen to each other without filters, and you are there for each other in the best interest. You take that personal accountability and you drive that personal accountability with each other. And that's what I understood, being there for each other. And then you have that speaking straight and really being appreciative of people's team members' contributions, recognizing them, and being able to kind of honor. So if I have committed something to someone, then honoring that commitment as well. And if everyone is honoring that commitment in terms of your company KPIs, that up to, then we are all successful together and creating that success together. And so, okay, now when we talk about developing our team members, what is your advice? What is your advice for developing team members?
Well, the first piece of advice I would give is to start with where they are. So often we want to develop someone, but where we relate to them from is where they should be, where they ought to be, where they're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And that it gets in the way of being effective with them. Mm-hmm. For all of us, even when we're dealing with ourselves, the only place we can move forward from is here. You can't move forward from where you ought to be, and you can't move forward where you should be and where you want to be. You only can move from right here. So if I can get clear about right here, where am I now from here, and be with where I am, okay, without reactivity, without making that wrong. Now, let's move forward from here. And that would be the biggest piece of advice I'd give. If we can get here, we can look together and see what's the next step forward, and then support the person in taking that next step forward.
Yeah, no, that's so important, so important. And thank you for sharing that, because that's where I see a lot of leaders where they make mistakes. And they don't want to be where their team member is. They want them to come to. So if you're standing here as a leader and your team member is right here or right here, and leaders' responsibility is to get to where their team member is, get their perspective, understand where they are, why they are there, and then looking at things from their lens and understanding that with the having that generous listening, and then also sharing where we are going and then what it will take and support and everything that they will need to really go where we want to go. And my mentor, John C. Maxwell, will sometimes share with me, Sunny, a lot of leaders, they're travel agents. And rather than being a guide, taking the trip, so being where that person is, they just want to be the travel agent that, okay, just go there. And I'm glad that you mentioned this, that it's about going where your team member is. And I think it works in your personal life as well. In the beginning, I made a lot of mistakes as a father, with my kids. So more of you kind of really you want them to go where you want them to go. But there's just so much effectiveness and joy in really taking that approach, the one that you just mentioned, like going where your kid is, where they are, and then working with them, joining hands, and then saying, okay, this is where we are going, and this is why we're going there, and having that clarity. And one thing that I want to share with you, I have gone through a lot of peer group leadership academies and a lot of trainings. And the highest impact that I have had so far was during collaborative way or from the collaborative way training. And why I say this is it's not only helped me at work, but it helped me in general in my life, at home, with my life partner, at home, my kids, my parents, my friends. And because listening generously, it works everywhere. When you're on the street, you're at the coffee shop, you're at home, you are, just having fun with your friends or hanging out with your friends, to at work, your team members. It helps you be a better family member, be a better friend, and be a better team member at work. It's a way of life. That's how I see it. And, the first thing, so we all picked like one practice, one principle to work on to start with after the training. We made a commitment with each other, and everyone picked what they wanted to work on, where they saw their bigger opportunity is. And I picked more of listening generously. And I thought, if I continue to evolve in my listening and really seeing things that I don't see right now, it's going to help me get to really where the person is and other things, right? So a lot of other things are dependent on that. How can I help someone? How can I serve someone if I don't know where they need help and I'm not listening? Now I'm not listening generously. But one perspective that I gained from this conversation is that being there for everyone, being at the center, covers listening generously, covers all other aspects of collaborative way, because in order for me to be there for someone, I need to listen. I need to own my commitments. I need to be able to speak straight. Even if it's not a good news, I need to be able to deliver that news with love and respect and with complete honesty and transparency. And I need to acknowledge and recognize people, to be there so that I celebrate those successes. I recognize them when they are doing well. And all other aspects of collaborative way, it really, they are byproducts probably of being there for everyone.
Yeah, expressions of being there for each other. And it's still useful to look at them very closely and practice them very deliberately. And I appreciate where you started, and what I also can kind of hear in this conversation, recognizing I've got listening generously isn't enough. I've got to really be straight with people, and which starts with being straight with myself. And also in honoring commitments, one of the things that is so powerful about the way we look at that is we see it as a relational phenomenon. So that if somebody makes a commitment to me and I accept it, then that means I'm also committed to that future happening. And so if it's not happening, I bring my commitment to that future to the interaction. And that's how we're going to be far more effective at accomplishing the things that we set out to. I don't abandon my commitment to that future just because my teammate is struggling. I maintain my commitment to that future, and then we engage to work out whatever is the useful and forwarding way to deal with whatever the challenges are that we're facing. Yeah. And that's another expression of being for them and being for them growing and succeeding. Like that.
Yes. Yeah, and one thing that especially in our world at IT by Design, Lloyd, we are based out of Jersey City Exchange Place, which is on the opposite side of Freedom Tower. So we are on this side of Hudson River in the U.S., and we have our back offices in India and Philippines. So we have two centers with over 500 people, and a lot of our team members there, they work with our client partners here in the US. And one common theme I used to hear internally from my leaders, where they're leading teams in India and Philippines, and my client partners, where they're working directly with their teams that are aligned with their projects and their accounts, is that, Sunny, is there a cultural difference that if I say jump 20 feet and can you jump, and person says yes? So the Asian culture or South Asian culture is people are, from the cultural point of view, very polite, and they have very hard time saying no to their managers, their leaders. And sometimes during the calls, they end up making that commitment that we know that they are setting themselves up for failure, because it's not a smart objective or smart goal. It's not specific, measurable, or attainable. So they will just say yes without really thinking about things, and they will end up making commitment that they don't own. And sometimes that leads to a lot of project delays and project outcomes being different than expected, because what person is saying, I will do this on a weekly L10 or weekly call or strategic session, that person don't end up owning that commitment. And when you go back and say, okay, but you said yes, I asked you 2-3 times, you said yes. And the normal answer or common answer would be, I thought that's what you want to hear. And I was not able to speak straight. And so I want to talk a little bit about speaking straight. And let's get a little bit deeper into our conversation with speaking straight, because I see a lot of technology companies are global. And there is that cultural element where if there's a technology company like IT by Design and our client partners where they have teams within IT by Design's India offices or Philippines offices, speaking straight, they normally have a hard time. And now we are taking, okay, what can we do as leaders to make sure that we provide them that environment, that psychological safety, that, hey, if you can't do that, it's okay to say no. It's better to say no when you can't deliver on that commitment than saying yes and not delivering. We always have had those conversations, but now the effectiveness of these conversations is 10x after going through collaborative way ourselves, and then also cascading that way of life with our next layer. And can you talk to me a little bit about speaking straight? What does it mean?
Well, you're touching two things here, and one of them is about honoring commitments, and you can't honor commitments without speaking straight. Okay, so it means if I'm going to speak straight, I first have to be straight with myself.
Yeah.
So if I'm being asked if I'm going to commit to something, I've got to look for myself and see, can I really do that? Now, where it's not just in, I find there's plenty of companies in the U.S. where people do exactly the same thing. They just say yes because that's what actually people want to hear, and then all I have to do is get a yes, and then I feel good, like he's got the monkeys on his back now. Okay, so there's a lot of work to do across the globe to learn how to say no. Mm-hmm. So it takes that, and when one is introducing people to the practice goes a long way. But it's also when a person says yes, and that they're struggling in this area, is to support them by going, now just help me understand, how do you plan to accomplish this? Have you thought through your steps? Do you have the wherewithal to do this? Do you have the support you need? Do you, so that you help them look for themselves. And when they get a sense, they'll begin to get a sense that you actually are interested in what's real versus this polite interchange that so often takes place, where I just say yes because I don't believe that there's room to say anything else. Mm-hmm. So it takes some real work to establish that, no, we actually do want to know what's real here. And you want, as you establish that, I've seen it in, I've worked with some construction companies where they had a Hispanic workforce, and I've also done a program in Mexico where we were working with native people from Mexico, who each of the participants. And when we got to this thing about similar conversations about honoring commitments, and I said, I've been told this is not a cultural thing here, this practice, that this goes against the culture. And they were like, hey, no, we actually do want to practice this. And yes, we are interested in actually stepping out of the normal way and being on time, for example. And so yes, there are cultural challenges. Many of those challenges are a lot more present even in the US than people acknowledge. And once we establish the practice between each other and come to trust that this is an authentic engagement, people begin to come forward like they have in those, like going back to the Hispanic workforce, they were saying, really? You really want our ideas? You really want us to say the truth? Yes. Whoa. So yes, you can get there. It takes work though.
Yeah. So one common thing. So when I kind of I took my own project, I'm like, let me just understand why people can't say no when they want to say no to something. They're committed. They are committed to the vision. You see that they're doing everything right, but they end up not meeting sometimes their commitments in terms of deliverables or crucial results that they need to produce from a project. Let me understand. I don't see any cultural alignment issue in terms of workplace cultural alignment. They are committed to the vision. They want to stay here long term. They want to grow. But why do they sometimes don't deliver on their commitments? And the normal, when it goes to, okay, I had too much work, or I was spread too thin, or something else is going on, and they take on this new project or new responsibility, and they didn't want to say no. And the common answer that I see is, we didn't want to let you down, or I was not sure how that, I didn't want to offend people, or I didn't want to offend my team members. How can you really develop your team members where that environment is better to say no than saying yes and not delivering on your commitments?
Well, you do it by demonstrating that is the case in their interactions with you. And it's also important to appreciate that one of the biggest challenges of speaking straight is that it's uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we get uncomfortable and then we abandon what we're up to and try to find the comfortable way to move forward. So often. So it's supporting people and working their way through the discomfort of saying no. So appreciating that discomfort is there, and then supporting them in saying no. And part of that can be in going back and look, well, what happened here? And let's look at, you didn't say, that would have been an important time to say no. Now let's look at that together.
Yes. And
not beat them up for not saying no, but also at the same time being real straight about that is what, this is the way we're learning to operate together. We're work together. And I'll support you in this. And also I need for you to step up and play. Okay. Um,
Yeah. And so that's a great advice for leaders, right? Maybe asking some better questions to make sure yes means yes. And
Exactly.
right. Yes means real yes.
Yes.
Right. And what is your advice for a team member? So when they need to manage up, what can they do to learn and develop and practice of that, the art of saying no when they have to say no? So if they feel that discomfort to say no in those situations, do you have any advice for them, something that they can do where they can learn and build their muscle of saying no when they have to say no?
Well, at least be honest in that situation. Start with something. No might be too high of a gradient. So then how about start with being honest and say, I don't see how I can do that and do this other thing.
Mm.
And that's also, if I know someone's having that tendency, then I will say, now just a minute, I want to make sure when you're yes here, how's that affecting the other things that you've already committed to? Are you really confident that you're going to be able to do both of these things or all of these things? Help me get a little bit. I know you got a lot going on in here. How are you going to integrate this? So you get more curious. That helps them. And then when they feel that they'll come forward a little, well, I'm not exactly sure. And then, okay, well, let's look together.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
okay, no, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Lloyd, for coming to my podcast. I truly, truly appreciate your time. And collaborative way is one of those things that we're going to continue to repeat here at IT by Design because it just made a huge, huge difference. Your team already added so much value to our organization and gave us that strategic advantage that we always needed. And thank you so much for joining me today, Lloyd. One more time. Thank you so much.
It's been a delight. I really enjoyed the conversation. And the one thing I'd add to what you just said was, and as you establish this way of working between each other, so that it's not just I'm learning this, but this is the way we relate to each other, then the possibility of 10X, very exciting. A delight to be with you. Thank you, Sunny.
Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you. Take care.